PPC. Pretoria Portland Cement, established, I think, by Sammy Marks in the north of Pretoria in 1892. Paul Kruger gave him the cement concession, which meant he was the only guy that was allowed to make cement for the whole country. It's expanded somewhat since then. 8 cement manufacturing facilities, milling depots, all that sort of thing. The big ones are at a place called Dwaalboom, which is out near the Botswana border, and then one substantial facility down in the Cape, a place called Riebeek West, Riebeek Kasteel, Riebeek something or other. It's also got assets now, though, in Botswana and Zimbabwe, and in recent years has been expanding into the rest of the African continent. We'll focus on that. Net, it's got a market share of northwards of 50%, so it's by far the largest player. Remember, its major competitors are offshore companies, Lafarge, Blue Circle, I think that's what Lafarge is called these days, and then AfriSam, which used to be called Anglo Alpha. Its market cap is 17.8 billion rand, price earnings ratio of 17, dividend yield of 4.3. So Rowan, market leader, best margins, but over the last 5 years, not really shooting the lights out. It was at 50 Rand plus at the peak. Took a big dive, now it just doesn't seem to be showing much signs of improvement yet.
Look, I think obviously in recent times you'll see there's been a pickup in the share price. I think, so this is a good example of the cyclicality of the sector, and I think it is the bellwether and gives you an idea of where the market is seeing the sector. So they came out with results yesterday. I think the management team under Ketso Gordon are doing a good job. They're focusing both, I think, in terms of efficiencies, but also in terms of the longer term strategy. You mentioned some of those African countries that they have been expanding into, and I think that's quite a big part of their focus going forward. They have put a medium term, I think, to 2017. They're looking for 40% of their revenue from the rest of Africa, as we call it, north of our borders. So, and they're at about 24% now. So I think that's quite a big part of the strategy. And then obviously the domestic environment. I think you've seen an uptick in cement demand. I think they had a 7.2% increase in
local market.
In volumes, which was overall, but also in the local market actually was the same number. But that was driven by the local market and Zimbabwe, in fact, which they're seeing quite a big uptick there, and then in a lesser extent in some of the other markets.
So looking good. And sales-wise, I mean, we must be reminded that the big mega projects and power stations do use a lot of cement, but a lot of cement still gets sold in bags in this country because we're a developing country, so there's lots of household formation, people putting up walls and existing properties, adding rooms to existing properties, and that's not just in the cities, but also in the rural areas and these sort of peri-urban settlements. So that's a big plus, and that's also correlated to consumer demand and the consumer sentiment. Talking again, though, about Ketso, I mean, this team that came out in PPC, they were pushed out of Barlow World, right? And then when they came to the market, they had Ori Fenn, who was the CEO. They've had other people, Paul Staver most recently. But Ketso is an interesting one because he's a private equitier. I don't know if that's the right term. Made a lot of money for himself at RMB. He's ex kind of ANC economics unit. He's got all the right kind of connections. He's quite a liberal guy. He's talking about executive remuneration. But certainly his time in private equity, it appeared that he got pretty good at sort of strategic deals. And you definitely get the sense he's going to shake this one going forward. So,
and I think also he's quite a Africa bull. The interactions I've had with him, he's been very positive. And I think you're seeing that being a much bigger part of their strategy than it has been in the past. And he's a good deal maker and a good strategic thinker, as you say. And he's got quite a broad sort of background in terms of both the private sector and the public sector.
And you're not concerned. I mean, he appears to have basically kicked out all of the senior managers apart from himself and brought in new people. I don't know, maybe I'm being slightly harsh there, but I mean, that's the sign of a CEO who knows what he wants and wants to run the show the way he wants to run it and wants to bring in his own new lieutenants, right?
Yeah, I think from a private equity background, one of the things that you see that you can do, obviously, to make a big impact on the business is obviously a management change. And I think him leading that charge, and as you say, the share hasn't done much over the last period, so I think it does need a shake-up, and there is this sort of broader African opportunity, and you need to grab it.
And he'll be certain to use the balance sheet perhaps a little bit more aggressively. One final question, because this is the big stock in the sector, so it's worth spending more time on. They bought this thing called Safika Cement or
That's
something, right?
Yes.
So that's a company that owns that IDM or IDP or ID something or other brand, which is imported. So cement imports, this is where you get it from like a boat, I think in China or something.
India.
You'd think that cement would be of enough low value and a heavy damn thing that you wouldn't float it across the ocean, but I guess that's the challenge. And buying IDM, that looks like a plus, right? I mean,
yes, yeah. So I think for the domestic market, I guess it sort of hedges, somewhat in terms of imported supply as well as local supply. So that makes sense. Obviously, with the weaker rand, I think the imports are getting less competitive again, and the local supply will prosper in that environment.
Okay, so all is given done at 32 or so rands a share. Was it 50, but I suppose was also at 22 or something. How are we feeling about it now? The cycle appears to be turning.
Yeah.
Not time to be hot on this one?
I think it's a longer term play. I mean, it's full in the short term, and you're seeing, we're going to talk about Sepaku coming online with up to 2 million tons in the short term. So that could, I think, dampen prices. So I would not be hot in the short term. Longer term, I like it.
Okay, well, Ketso's a buddy of mine, so I'm going to say I'm hot on this one.